I am of the conviction that the dollar cannot be patched together again. They are frantically working on coming up with an international system. You know, in the old days, we used to hear talk and rumors of devaluations. When it was $35 an ounce, when are they going to devalue? And our government would incessantly deny there will not be a devaluation. It was a big event in 1971 when the dollar was devalued by 8%. It was devalued by changing the price of gold from 35 to 38. But it was always denial, always denial. And then later on, they went and made a significant denial from that there will not be any more devaluations, and they devalued from 38 and they took it up to $42. Now, of course, it floats and the price of gold floats. But now the denial is, when you hear it on the news tonight, they were ridiculing anybody who would suggest that there may be some international discussions going on with the banks about a new international currency. I believe they are doing it. And the more they deny it, the more you ought to be perking your heads up and paying attention, because we're probably getting closer to it. Now, the only thing that's keeping them from doing that is they're under the gun too. Because Mises taught that currencies can't be created out of thin air. If you just move onto an island and we decide, well, this is what we're going to use as money, and we'll print these pieces of paper, it never works. The only reason the dollar works, even though it's fiat money, is because it at one time was linked to gold, and that's how it came into existence. So they will have a lot of trouble having a new currency, even though I'm sure they are working diligently in doing that. But once again, this is an attack on us as a nation and us as a people, because you don't need a federal government. You don't need a Federal Reserve System. You don't need a U.S. Congress to have signed money. All you have to do is legalize the Constitution and allow gold and silver to be legal tender, and you don't need a Federal Reserve System. You know, the Federal Reserve was brought into existence in 1913 because they said they needed a lender of last resort and they needed a stable currency. So, but now I don't think it's a lender of last resort. I think it's become a spender of first resort. We talk about the hundreds of billions of dollars the Congress appropriates, and sometimes I just think that's a distraction, because the big event is occurring at the Federal Reserve System. This is where the power is, and this is where the control is, whether it's international, what they do, and it was described to you earlier, all those things that they do that we're not allowed to know anything about. So I now call the Federal Reserve System the fourth branch of government. It is essentially equivalent to, if not superior to, the other three branches. Now, it seems to be a hopeless task, but if we remember how the Federal Reserve came into existence, we should remember how we can get rid of it. It was done by a congressional act, and we can get rid of it by a congressional act, and we should. Most people ask me, it makes so much sense. Most people understand that, if you print a lot of money, it's going to lose its value. Why is it that the members of Congress and everybody goes along with this? And it's an interesting question because it's for different reasons. A lot of them never even thought about it, and they were never taught about it. And during the bubble phase, they're not too worried about it because there's an appearance of wealth. But what they don't realize is that the wealth is based on really borrowed money and an illusion about the value of the currency. So the value of the house goes up, and they claim that's a lot of capital, which it is not. And stocks go up. They think they have a lot of wealth, which they do not, because that can disappear rather quickly. So the Federal Reserve then has only about one thing to do. They have to keep the whole thing going over and over again. But the members of Congress are paying more attention, and that is good. But those who are in charge, those who are in leadership of Republicans and Democrats, I think they know generally what's going on. But there's only two groups that we have to worry about in Washington that want to continue this process, and that tends to be the liberals and the conservatives. But they get along quite well. They pretend not to get along, but they get along pretty well because liberals like to spend, for one thing, they like the welfare state. And the conservatives like it because they like the warfare state. So they get together and they compromise, and we have both. So now we suffer from the welfare warfare state, which is what we need to repeal. Because if we were taxed for what we need to balance the budget, obviously the economy would even be in a lot worse shape, but it would have stopped a little bit sooner. But this is a way you can delay the payment. You run up the bills, you write Treasury bills, the Fed monetizes this, the pain and suffering goes to some unknown person. They say that poor people don't pay income taxes, but believe me, they pay a lot of penalty. They pay for the higher prices and they lose their jobs first, and eventually it moves up the ladder and the inflation ends up wiping out the middle class. For a long time, the process is designed to transfer wealth from the middle class to the rich. And they're still working at it. Just look at all these bailouts. Is the money coming to your pocket? Are they sending it to you? Have they accepted our solution to some of this? Yes. What we could have done if we needed to get some money into your pockets, we just would have gotten rid of the income tax, and that would have helped you. But instead, we do the bailouts, we further transfer the wealth, but that will eventually come to an end. It has to. It can't last. But the goal, of course, is to build big government for different reasons and hope they can keep it together. And that they have done for a while, but we live in historic times. This bubble was not just huge. It was the largest, in my estimation, the largest in the history of the world. It has been pervasive. The dollar, because we issued the dollar, and it was the reserve currency, these other countries took it and they put it in their funds and used it as reserves. So that was even a relief from us because we didn't have to deal with as much price inflation here. But what's going to happen when they lose confidence in the dollar? And they're starting to get nervous. The Chinese are getting nervous with this. They're talking about the new currency. We live in big times, big, very, very important times. And that is why we must pay attention. And that is why our campaign that we're in the middle of right now has to win, because our country is threatened if we don't understand what liberty really means and how it's connected to the financial system and how it's connected to the Federal Reserve.